Hello, Steve White, Trek Boy 89 for Steve Arts 89. I just watched episode 8 of season 3 of Lower Decks, Crisis Point Part 2, which is the sequel to the movie parody episode they did. And it was a bit of a mess. And that was kind of the story in a way, but it was a bit of a mess. There was one the first scene is like an action scene where you have like an Enterprise E come in with Boiler being the hero. And then they end up going to like a space station that is kind of like a regular one, but it's on a planet. And they recreate the regular one and the Genesis device video and everything. So all that's kind of cool. But then they get into, because these Romulans have stolen this device and they have to go and hunt them and blah, 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 and time travel and blah, blah, blah. And I mean, it's interesting that they make it look like animated film, like to look at it is interesting. But Mariner is like getting on Boiler because his story's not as good as hers, and he goes on this weird bent where he's trying to like find the meaning of life and the meaning in meaningless death and so forth, and she's like, what is it about? This is boring, this is not fun, blah blah, and she storms off and she's not happy. And what she finds out is that Boiler's, I know I say his name wrong, but this is how I say it, his twin, his alter or whatever, died through a really stupid means. He apparently, there was a gas leak in his cabin. Like, how do you have a gas leak on a starship? Why would you even have gas on a star? It just doesn't make any sense. But he's mourning that, so he's trying to find meaning, and he's finding no meaning in the holodeck, no answers to anything. And eventually he passes out, and he ends up on Kirk's cabin from Generations. And he goes into the barn, and it's not Kirk, it's Sulu, who is feeding a horse. And he's like, oh, I took this cabin off Kirk's hands when he went off to time travel, blah, blah, blah. And they have a chat, and he basically is like, if you worry about finding meaning in everything, then you're going to miss, all the random sort of joy in life. Because that is a reflection of that. And so it was kind of a nice little moment with George. For a second I thought we were going to get Shatner, and I'm like, I'm glad we have George instead. And they actually said that in the episode. I'm like, oh, that's a bit of a dig at Shatner. We all know that Takai does not like Shatner, so that was a fun little moment there. Eventually he wakes up, and she's like, your movie wasn't that bad. He's like, yeah, it's okay, blah, 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 and they go off. He's like, oh, glad they didn't have some dark twist ending or whatever, or cliffhanger. And then of course they go to a shot in a nebula, and there's a Defiant class ship, and we find that Boiler's twin actually isn't dead, that he faked his death so he could join Section 31. I'm like, oh, really? Really, you're going to bring Section 31? And the good thing was they made fun of it, because this lady's giving him a badge, and he's like, if we're really super secret-sided, why do we have a badge that, like, announces who we are? And she's like, you can still be dead. And he's like, okay, I'll wear the badge. So, and he laughs maniacally, and that's the end of the episode. And I'm like, okay, that was a good episode until they brought in Section 31, because Section 31 is sacrilege to Star Trek. Star Trek, there is no Section 31 in Gene Roddenberry's future. He didn't create that. They put that in there to spite him in Deep Space Nine days, because Stephen Ira Burr hated Gene Roddenberry and hated Star Trek and tried to destroy it. And that was his way of doing it, creating Section 1, basically saying, all this, it doesn't exist because you have to have this behind it to prop it up. The utopian vision, that Gene had, it doesn't actually work. You need this behind it. You need all this right-wing, evil sort of justifying anything, sort of this sort of organisation, secret organisation behind it. That's the only way the illusion of utopia can be maintained, which is such a slap in the face to Star Trek and everything. So the fact they would bring it into this, because I was enjoying the show. The last couple of episodes I enjoyed it. I mean, the last one was dumb, but that was just the nature of the story. But if they're going to bring Section 31 into it and validate it, because they've kind of destroyed Section 31. They destroyed it in Into Darkness, and they kind of destroyed it in season, I think, 2 of, some season of Discovery. And they kind of made them out to be the bad guys. But yet, Kurtzman still wants to do his show, his Section 31 show, because he just doesn't get that it's the absolute opposite of Star Trek, and the only people who would enjoy it would be people who hate Star Trek, because it's literally the opposite of Star Trek and everything it stands for, and undermines everything about Star Trek and the Starfleet future and the universe and everything. So yeah, I didn't enjoy that at the end. If it was a joke, if that was part of the holodeck that was still running, that's fine. But if it's supposed to be real life and that's going to be what happens in the rest of the season, that he ends up having to fight his evil self or whatever, that could be fun, but not in the context of validating and exploring Section 31. And yeah, so I don't know. Don't know how I feel about that. I mean, they might be about to ruin the show. I don't know. I hate Section 31. But I'm going to go. Feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe. I don't think I forgot anything else about the episode. It was nice to see Sulu. And yeah, let's hope they don't go too far into Section 31.